by our people at this time. Many of our citizens face the harsh reality of unemployment and are rendered helpless to provide for themselves and their families. Workers in the tourism sector were some of the hardest hit as the country closed its borders. Hairdressers, barbers, and others in the beauty sector temporarily lost their clients. And students lost valuable face-to-face instruction and opportunities for socialization. These, Mr. Speaker, represent a mere token of the true impact of this devastating pandemic. In addition, there is no escaping rising global prices. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we empathize because we too must face the challenges of the new normal environment that has been thrust upon us. This period is not for the faint at heart, but again, Mr. Speaker, we are confident that we will get through this. Mr. Speaker, government pledges to do everything within its power to continue to protect lives and livelihoods and return our economy to a robust, inclusive, and sustainable growth path. The coronavirus is here to stay. We must therefore reorient our thinking and approach to living with the virus, as total elimination will be almost impossible at this time. The level of vaccine hesitancy among our people is concerning, and we continue to encourage vaccination as the primary means of protecting ourselves. Having witnessed firsthand the destructiveness of this virus, we are keen to achieve herd immunity to safeguard our people, our country, and our economy. Reshaping and renewing our economy and society in this new and uncertain environment will be difficult, but not impossible. I have absolute confidence in the leadership of our country, the stakeholders who work collaboratively with government to promote and facilitate economic growth and development, and in the resilience of the Grenadian people, who seek to thrive even amidst the most difficult challenges. Mr. Speaker, to achieve our desired objectives, our efforts must be rooted in a forward-looking economic and social reality. I therefore now turn to the economic and social context of this budget. Performance of the domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, despite the major setbacks this year, our economic recovery is well underway, following the unprecedented decline of 13.8% last year. However, this recovery is slower than expected, with real GDP growth of 4.8% compared to the 6% originally projected. The recovery this year is driven by strong growth in several major sectors, including construction, 22.8%, agriculture, 12.5%, wholesale and retail, 4.4%, and financial intermediation, 3.5%. Recovery in all other major sectors, including hotel and restaurant, transport, storage, and communications, continue to lag behind. Mr. Speaker, the annual percentage increase in the cost of living as measured by the change in the Consumer Price Index is now estimated at 2.2%. The increase in domestic prices is driven by the sharp rise in food and fuel prices and the shipping costs associated with supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic. No sector is immune to this upward price movement. Like our constituents, Mr. Speaker, we are feeling the impact of increased prices. As a caring government, that is deeply concerned about the welfare of our people. We have explored some options that will bring relief to the population, and I will address these later. Mr. Speaker, the situation in Grenada is not unique. Many countries, even advanced economies with far more resources than Grenada, are battling growing inflation, which is driven by factors external to their economies. Government takes very seriously its responsibility to explore ways to provide relief to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. However, in doing so, Mr. Speaker, the country's fiscal situation and the affordability of relief measures must be carefully considered. Fiscal performance. Mr. Speaker, government finances remain significantly weaker than in 2019, the year immediately preceding the COVID-19 shock. But this year, there are some positive developments compared to 2020. Revenue collection this year have slightly surpassed the 2020 outturn, but remain significantly below the 2019 performance. Grant spending for this year will come in much lower than programmed, but is significantly higher than outlays in 2019 and 2020. Recurrent spending has remained high due in part to greater outlays on wages, salaries, and pensions associated with the implementation of the 4% salary increase for public officers. On the capital expenditure, Mr. Speaker, despite a very slow start, spending picked up significantly in the second half of the year. Also, government has achieved its targeted PSIP implementation rate of 80% this year. By year end, the following results are expected relative to the 2020 performance. Recurrent revenues of $690.4 million compared to $689.6 million. Grant expenditure of $232.6 million compared to $103.1 million. Recurrent expenditure of $598.6 million compared to $651.5 million. Capital spending of $261.7 million compared to $269.9 million. A primary surplus of $117 million compared to a primary deficit of $72.4 million. An overall surplus of $62.7 million compared to a deficit of $128.3 million. Mr. Speaker, it is even more critical for government to ensure that our scarce resources are well targeted and efficiently managed to achieve the best outcomes for our people. Debt dynamics. Mr. Speaker, the combined impact of the severe shock to economic output by COVID-19 and the new borrowings to adequately respond to the crisis led to a 13 percentage point increase in our debt to GDP ratio to 70.4% at the end of 2020. Our estimated debt to GDP ratio is now 69%, which is slightly higher than projected due to the slower than expected economic recovery. Although the improvement is below expectation, the direction of the change is favorable. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, Grenada's debt is assessed as sustainable by the International Monetary Fund and other international financial organizations. Despite this temporary setback, Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to achieving the debt target of 55% of GDP as set out in the Fiscal Responsibility Law. Unemployment and poverty. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to report that the spike in the unemployment rate in the second quarter of 2020 has proven to be transient. Some 13,603 jobs have returned, with the unemployment rate falling from 28.4% in the second quarter of 2020 to 16.6% in the corresponding period this year. Despite, Mr. Speaker, the considerable improvement in the unemployment rate, many of our citizens are still without work and continue to face severe hardship. Similar to what was provided through the first stimulus package, Mr. Speaker, the current package provides support for thousands of workers made jobless by the pandemic. Government has made good progress in reducing poverty in our country, Mr. Speaker. A recent poverty assessment study conducted in collaboration with the World Bank showed that the poverty rate fell roughly 13 percentage points from 13.7% in 2008, 37.7% in 2008, to 25% in 2019. Empowerment of our people continues to be one of the key priorities of government, and we will continue to pursue initiatives that help to improve socio-economic conditions for the vulnerable. I will now turn to the theme and strategic focus for the 2022 budget. Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic brought about unparalleled challenges for our small nation, creating macroeconomic instability and threatening to undermine years of social economic progress. The unfortunate reality, Mr. Speaker, is that even after 20+ months of battling the disease, the virus is still threatening our survival. The threat is even more acute given our low vaccination rate. Therefore, protecting the lives of our citizens and visitors remains our top priority. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we must continue to safeguard the jobs and incomes of our citizens, supporting them where possible to alleviate the hardships caused by the pandemic. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we must continue to prioritize investing for long-term development, building our social and economic resilience as enshrined in the vision of our National Sustainable Development Plan 2020 to 2035. And I quote, Grenada, a resilient and prosperous nation with a conscious and caring citizenry, promoting human dignity and realizing its full potential through sustainable economic, social, and environmental progress for all. Mr. Speaker, in the lead up to the budget presentation, we consulted widely on these priorities for 2022. Today, I extend a public thank you to the participants for the quality of submissions received, many of which have been taken on board for implementation in 2022. In this context, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to present the 2022 budget under the theme Towards Vision 2035, protecting lives, safeguarding livelihoods, and investing for growth and resilience. Outlook. Mr. Speaker, macroeconomic conditions are projected to further improve in 2022. The economy is projected to expand by 4.5% next year, driven by strong growth in all major sectors, especially the tourism-related sectors. Notwithstanding the further growth in output, the nominal dollar value of national output in 2022 will not reach the level achieved in 2019. Mr. Speaker, accelerating job creation will be crucial to safeguarding livelihoods. We anticipate progress on this as the recovery strengthens. Recurrent expenditure are expected to further strengthen in 2022. Recurrent expenditure will exceed the outturn for this year led in part by the 4% increase in salaries for the period 2022 and the many cost of living relief initiatives. Mr. Speaker, government will further expand its capital investment program in 2022 to counter the protracted impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, government will seek parliamentary approval to invoke the escape clause under the Fiscal Responsibility Act to allow for this expanded capital investment program. Two of the conditions for invoking the escape clause have been met, in particular where, one, a natural disaster, public health pandemic, or war, as a result of which a state of emergency has been declared by the Governor General in accordance with Section 17, subsection 1 of the Constitution. And two, real GDP experiences a decline of more than 2% in a given fiscal year, or cumulative decline equal to or greater than 3% over 2 consecutive fiscal years. In the case of the latter, the cumulative decline over the last 2 fiscal years exceeds 5%. Mr. Speaker, government intends to build on the much improved implementation rate of the PSIP achieved in 2021. I now turn to the estimates of revenue and expenditure and the specific areas of intervention. Mr. Speaker, addressing the unparalleled health and socio-economic challenges caused by the pandemic remains a priority for this government. The 2022 budget strategy, therefore, aims to address these challenges and provide for a total expenditure, including amortization, of $1,352,210,635. The overall budget summary is as follows. Recurrent revenue, $722.2 million. Total grants, $175.4 million. Current expenditure, $661.7 million. Capital expenditure, $333.8 million. Current account surplus, $60.5 million. Principal repayments, amortization, $356.7 million. Primary deficit after grants, $34.2 million. Overall deficit after grants, $97.9 million. The detailed budget allocations by vote can be found in Appendix 1 of the published statement. Mr. Speaker, government is confident that the above represents the appropriate fiscal stance for 2022. It recognizes the need for counter-cyclical fiscal policy to stimulate the economy and bolster recovery as we escape the doldrums caused by the pandemic. However, Mr. Speaker, I wish to underscore the importance of prudent fiscal management, particularly in this period, to ensure that our scarce available resources are properly targeted to optimize the benefit to the people of Grenada, Kaku, and Petit Martinique. Government will therefore continue to be fiscally prudent in managing the country's finances, taking prompt action where necessary to correct inadequacies in the system. Mr. Speaker, with a deficit projected for 2022, government will need $98 million more financing than what it expects to generate from domestic revenues and the grants to meet all its obligations. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to indicate that due to our fiscal responsibility and the tremendous sacrifices made by the people of this country, we have already identified the funding to fully close this gap. External sources comprising of new loans disbursement minus principal repayment amounting to $14.4 million. One of the key sources of our new external loan disbursement is a budget support operation with the World Bank to the tune of US $25 million, or 67 million EC dollars, which will become available in the first quarter of 2020. Other sources, Mr. Speaker, net drawdown from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, the reserve. of $83.6 million. Mr. Speaker, the foregoing is testimony of government's prudent fiscal management since 2014, which has better positioned the country to accumulate fiscal buffers, which can in turn help to mitigate against shocks, such as the one we are currently battling. Prudent fiscal management has also enabled external resource mobilization, such as the World Bank support just mentioned. More details of the financing of the 2022 budget deficit can be found in the memorandum at the beginning of the detailed estimates of revenue and expenditure. Key intervention, Mr. Speaker: protecting lives, safeguarding livelihoods, and building a more sustainable future. Mr. Speaker, we owe a debt of gratitude to our frontline workers for keeping us safe during this pandemic. And while we applaud the hard work and sacrifice, we also know that much more will be required of them and us, as COVID-19 remains a clear and present danger. In this context, a special allocation of $6 million has been made to support the continued fight against COVID-19 through the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, beyond COVID-19, we must accelerate our efforts to improve health care for delivery and build resilience in the sector. Installation work is currently underway at the General Hospital for a brand new 128-slice GE Revolution Evo CT scanner, generously donated by the Maria Holder Memorial Trust. Mr. Speaker, better diagnostic services tend to lead to better outcomes for patients. Therefore, government also purchased a new GE XR6000 digital X-ray machine, which is now being installed. The state-of-the-art device will expand imaging services at the General Hospital and allow for more types of X-rays to be done with immediate display of the films for evaluation. Mr. Speaker, we are heeding the clarion call of our citizens for a more reliable supply of medicines and pharmaceuticals, including for dialysis administration, more doctors and nurses at our hospitals and community health centers and polyclinics, better health infrastructure, and improved medical services. Mr. Speaker, in addressing the many challenges to improving healthcare delivery and building resilience in the sector, government is cognizant that national health insurance remains of paramount importance. I am pleased to report that work on a national health insurance program for Grenada continues unabated despite challenges arising from the pandemic. A total allocation of $97.1 million is provided under the Ministry of Health for 2022, an overall increase of $2.2 million relative to 2021. Trade facilitation and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise policy. Mr. Speaker, growing and diversifying our export base is critically important in building a robust and resilient economy. Government will therefore continue to strengthen trade facilitation, secure new markets, and boost production of goods and services. Mr. Speaker, the private sector has recommended the establishment of a central repository to house all export-related information. The government strongly supports this recommendation. The Ministry of Trade will launch a new trade information portal in the first quarter of next year, compiling information such as trade requirements, trade agencies, and marketing. Business development for MSME. Mr. Speaker, collaboration is integral to the success of many things. In the case of sustainable development, it is critical that key stakeholders work together towards common goals that benefit all. Government reiterates its commitment to enabling the growth of a vibrant private sector that can generate sustainable jobs and bolster our economic recovery and resilience. Given the significant impact of the pandemic on the business community, especially our MSMEs, government, like a true partner, has stepped in to provide significant financial support to help businesses stay afloat with the provision of economic stimulus packages in 2020 and 2021. Our facility consists of two components, one which deals with the recapitalizing and restructuring the Small Business Development Fund, which provides highly concessional loans funding of up to $40,000 for micro businesses at an interest rate of 1%, with a repayment period of up to 10 years. Component 2 provides highly concessional loan financing of up to $300,000 to small, micro, and medium-sized enterprises at an interest rate of 1%, with a 3-year grace period and repayment over 12 years. This ongoing commitment is further demonstrated with the extension of the loan support program for MSMEs into 2022. Mr. Speaker, the government has budgeted an additional $10 million for these initiatives. Mr. Speaker, in addition to financing support under the Small Business Development Fund and the COVID-19 support loan, further access to credit is provided through the Grenada Development Bank's regular lending programs. There has been significant growth in 2021, and the year so far, the Government Development Bank has provided loans in excess of $20 million. Mr. Speaker, national security. National security is a key pillar that supports the social and economic fabric of any society. The Royal Grenada Police Force continues to provide excellent service in the fight against COVID-19, while at the same time addressing criminal elements in the society. In the face of emerging threats and increasing complex crimes, we recognize the need to modernize our national security architecture. Mr. Speaker, the government is also taking measures to ensure that its maritime space is adequately protected, and as such, we are currently engaged in the development of a national maritime security strategy, in addition to a national security strategy. This initiative will be another first for Grenada. Major private sector developments. Mr. Speaker, as government presses on with its public sector investment program, PSIP, outlined below, there is also a significant level of activity being generated in the private sector. I will now highlight some of the major private sector projects facilitated by the government during 2021, as well as projects that will come on stream in 2022. Mr. Speaker, 8 private sector projects, primarily in agriculture and the accommodation sectors, commenced operation in 2021, creating permanent job opportunities for many Grenadians. The implementation of 50 other major private sector projects, which I announced in my last budget presentation, are now underway and in various stages of completion. Mr. Speaker, a significant level of economic activity and employment opportunities are already created by those ongoing projects, and much more will be generated by the projects that are expected to commence implementation in 2022. Silver Sands Legacy at Mongkuma. This US $80 million project aims to create a modern upmarket resort to increase Grenada's appeal as a unique must-see destination. Construction is expected to start in the first quarter of 2022. The Rivera project. This US $60 million project will comprise a 100-key hotel, all-day dining and beach, restaurants, spa and gym. Construction is expected to start in the third quarter of 2022, and with operation commencing in the third quarter of 2025. The Port Louis project. This $250 million project aims to create a premium experience in accommodation, fashion, food, film, art, music, and culture. It will comprise of 2 hotels and will provide a treasure trove of duty-free jewelry, apparel, and accessories. Homer Limited. This project entails a 240 hotel room luxury resort developed across 3 properties in True Blue. This $60 million project is carded for implementation in 2022 and will create employment for 12 persons when completed. Star Development Hotel. Located in Point Salines, this 60-room luxury hotel with spa will cost $56 million EC. When completed, it will create employment for 15 persons. Digital transformation. Mr. Speaker, as the COVID-19 pandemic forced us into a new normal, technology became the single tool enabling continuity in the face of widespread shutdowns. Government therefore sought to implement its digital agenda, of which cybersecurity is an important element. The goal here, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that the digital agenda is operationalized in a safe and secure digital environment. Government will continue to pursue a digital strategy to harness and leverage information and communications technology as an enabler and driver of economic transformation. In 2021, several challenges were encountered with the rollout of 2 of the major initiatives under this strategy. Government has taken determined steps to remove bottlenecks in the implementation of these projects, including establishing a digital transformation office within the Department of Economic and Technical Cooperation with targeted resources to move these projects forward. Implementation is therefore expected to accelerate in 2022 for both the Digital Governance for Resilience Project and the Caribbean Regional Digital Transformation Project. Tourism. Mr. Speaker, there are increasing signs that activity in the tourism and private tertiary education sectors is picking up faster than earlier anticipated. Stopover arrivals are rebounding strongly, with arrivals for the off-peak months of July and August 2021 approaching pre-pandemic levels. Many of our hotels and guest houses have reopened the doors and room occupancy is increasing. The resumption of cruise tourism, with over 200 calls scheduled between November 2021 and May 2022, will be a major boost to the recovery of the sector. Mr. Speaker, the much anticipated 3rd Test match between West Indies and England in March next year will also provide another boost to the tourism sector. The removal of quarantine requirements for fully vaccinated travelers will also contribute to re-energizing travel to our shows, Mr. Speaker. This budget provides for $20.9 million to support recovery of the hospitality industry. Mr. Speaker, although the tourism sector was hard hit by the pandemic, discussions were being held on creating an avenue to provide training for our people in the hospitality sector. Through a private sector initiative launched in 2021, the West Indies School of Hospitality, WISH, will provide thousands of Cornell University scholarships for hospitality workers in Grenada to get free access to some of the best training available globally. The aim is for Grenada to have the most highly trained hospitality workforce. A formal memorandum of understanding between WISH and the Ministry of Tourism and Education is now being developed. CBI performance, citizen by investment. Mr. Speaker, despite a sluggish start this year, performance under the Citizenship by Investment program strengthened significantly in the second half of the year, and interest in the program remains strong. At the end of October, 437 applications were received, compared to 303 for the corresponding period in 2020. The majority of these applications are based on approved projects, while 170 are related to contributions to the National Transformation Fund. Total receipts under the CBI program as of October 31 was US $30.6 million. Mr. Speaker, government continues to make determined efforts to improve the performance and operations of the CBI program, ensuring that its integrity and reputation are maintained. Improved operational efficiency will reduce processing time for applications and generate greater financial resources. Additionally, government will take on board the recommendations to expand the priority sectors supported under the CBI program. Food and nutrition security. Mr. Speaker, improving Grenada's food security is a critical priority area for government. The agricultural sector is expected to grow robustly by 12.5% this year, with further growth of 8.4% projected for the coming year. Government applauds the sterling contribution farmers and fisherfolk have made towards food and nutrition security, and we pledge continued engagement with farmers to promote a strong, vibrant, and modern agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, access to reliable markets and market information is quintessential to boosting production and sales, to generate growth and employment opportunities in the sector. This budget, therefore, includes measures that will enable government to aggressively tackle many of the issues affecting our agricultural and fishery sectors. Our priorities for 2022 include reforming the Marketing and National Importing Board, MNIB, to facilitate better delivery of its mandate as a reliable and affordable source of critical inputs for our farmers and a facilitator of market for their products. To address the rising costs of farm inputs, in the quest to make our homegrown food more affordable, government through the MNIB or existing suppliers will subsidize the price of fertilizer up to a maximum of 10 bags. On the issue of predial larceny, we recognize that effectively addressing this requires a whole of government approach and collaboration with our farmers. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, allocations have been made to support initiatives relating to public education and greater use of technology. Stiffer penalties will also be pursued. Mr. Speaker, pests and diseases have always created a challenge for the agricultural sector, and most recently, the cotton-scale insect has impacted high demand and lucrative crops, especially our soursop. Accordingly, government will intensify its effort to combat this and other pests and diseases. Access to farms remains a major constraint to the modernization of our agricultural sector. Despite the lack of external resources, government has continued implementation of phase 3 of the agricultural feeder road projects using local resources. Work on several feeder roads have been completed, and others are progressing smoothly. An allocation of $5 million have been made for the continuation of this project in 2022. Mr. Speaker, the construction of several other farm roads will be financed under the IFAD CDB supported Climate, Agriculture and Rural Enterprise Program, SIPE. Government has increased the allocation for the Farm Road Labor Program by $1.5 million in 2022 to support expansion and restructuring of this initiative. All things considered, in excess of $35 million will be invested in the agricultural sector in 2022. In the fisheries sector, Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has negatively impacted fish landings, resulting in reduced earnings. Notwithstanding, government is moving ahead with improvements to operations and processes within the sector, and a comprehensive analysis is underway as a first step. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, Grenada will benefit from the unleashing of the Blue Economy of the Caribbean project, with US $0.7 million of the funds allocated for the expansion of the climate risk insurance for fisheries. Developing human capital. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the major disruption of our education system, our students have again performed well in the regional examinations. Our students, educators, and parents have displayed true grit and tenacity and deserve high commendations for their tremendous dedication and sacrifice. Not only for the success in this year's regional educations, but for demonstrating impressive resilience in the face of adversity. Indeed, our education system rose to the most recent challenge of online learning, although significant gaps remain. Mr. Speaker, government remains committed to achieving a modern education system capable of delivering on our national goal of high human and social development, putting people at the center of sustainable economic development and transformation. In 2022, Mr. Speaker, government through the Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development will invest $133.5 million in the sector, an increase of approximately $10 million over 2021. Some key areas of focus for 2022 will be the Grenada Education Enhancement Project, phases 1 and 2. Major construction works are ongoing under this important project with funding from the Caribbean Development Bank. Phase 1, which involves work on several schools, including Bishop's College in Caracou, Presentation Brothers College, the Grenada Seventh-day Adventist Comprehensive School, St. Joseph Convent, St. George's, and the Grenville, will be completed in the first quarter of next year at a cost of $43.5 million. Phase 2 of this project, valued at $41.8 million, will see construction and rehabilitation works on several other schools, including the St. Andrew's Anglican Primary, Grenada Christian Academy, St. David's Catholic Secondary School, and the J.W. Fletcher Memorial Secondary School. Work will commence before March next year, Mr. Speaker. A sum of $6.2 million is allocated for this project in 2022. Improving the quality of teaching and learning via blended educational delivery, an important project in this area, is the e-books program at a cost of $8.2 million. Mr. Speaker, with COVID-19 as part of the new landscape and given the imperatives of ensuring that our students and teachers operate in a safe environment, an allocation of $2.7 million has been made for the COVID-19 response within the school system. Government has commissioned a review of the TA Marischal Community College and Education Acts, key steps in the transformation and development of the education sector. Empowerment, youth skills, and training. While the pandemic has affected us all, our young people have borne the brunt of its social and economic impact, compounding the challenges they already face. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to vigorously pursue strategies to empower young people to realize their true potential through nurturing effective education, training and skills development, and creating opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship. The Imani program remains an important vehicle in preparing our young people for the world of work and entrepreneurship. In this regard, government will continue to implement various recommendations to improve the effectiveness of the program. The transition is a key element in achieving improved outcomes for this initiative. Efforts to guide this process are well underway, specifically for the period December 2020 to October 2021. Close to 1,000 trainees have found gainful employment in the private and public sector. Some of the areas to which they have transitioned include, but are not limited to, the newly launched Garment Production Cooperative and Grencase. Some groups of trainees with guidance from the youth-based units in the Ministry of Youth Development have also joined forces to provide a variety of services across economic sectors. Government will continue its work to ensure that at least 1,500 more trainees are able to transition in 2022 through the initiatives of the youth-based units in conjunction with the Department of Cooperatives and the private sector. Mr. Speaker, more than $10 million is allocated in 2022 for skills training and development, particularly among the youth. Under the National Skills Development Program, an allocation of $1.5 million is made for the development of skills in various areas, including sewing and furniture making, while $9.1 million has been budgeted on entrepreneurial skills training for 100 youth. The provision of business support training to 125 youth entrepreneurs, and the provision of seed financing to 220 youth. When considered with the allocation for education, over $142 million will be invested in capacity building and empowerment initiatives, particularly among the nation's youth. Mr. Speaker, sports and the arts. Notwithstanding the crippling impact of the pandemic on sports, culture, and the arts, our sportsmen and women and cultural artists continue to excel in the various disciplines. Grenada fielded 6 athletes in the 2020 Summer Olympic Games held in Tokyo. Our tiny nation has now medaled in 3 consecutive Olympics. Mr. Speaker, special mention was made of our star athlete Kirani James, who is now the most decorated Olympian in the 400 meters with a full set of gold, silver, and bronze medals. Kirani's latest Olympic glory is particularly heartening as he has been battling, Mr. Speaker, with a debilitating and deadly Graves' disease. Mr. Speaker, we extend hearty congratulations to all our heroes in the field of sports, culture, and the arts, who continue to raise our flag and make us proud. Government will continue to invest heavily in the development of sports, culture, and the arts, given their significant role in the development of our citizens, especially our young people. Serious consideration will also be given to the resumption of the Intercall Games, the showcase of athletic talent at the secondary school levels. Mr. Speaker, in preparation for the upcoming test match between West Indies and England, government will undertake much needed refurbishment work on the National Cricket Stadium. A total of $5 million has been allocated towards this project. Mr. Speaker, bids for the reconstruction of the Cebu Cultural Center are currently being evaluated. An award of contract by the procurement board is expected soon, and the aim is to start construction by the end of this year. A sum of $3 million has been allocated in the 2022 budget for the construction works on this project. Women empowerment. Mr. Speaker, Grenada has made significant advances towards achieving gender equality, eradicating gender-based violence, strengthening families, and empowering our women. The pandemic has threatened some of these gains, especially as it relates to reducing gender-based violence and sexual abuse of our children. Government reiterates its commitment to achieving gender equality and empowering our women and girls with special initiatives in the 2022 budget. A major initiative in this regard is the grant-supported Grenada Spotlight Initiative project funded by the United Nations Children Fund and other UN organizations. This initiative will contribute to the full implementation of Grenada's gender equality policy and action plan, and to strengthen interventions to combat family violence. A sum of $3.8 million is budgeted for the continuation of this project next year. Mr. Speaker, government through the Attorney General's chambers has created a draft sexual offenders registry bill for consultation. Government is moving, Mr. Speaker, to adopt a gender-responsive budgeting approach, starting with a pilot in the 2022 budget, to ensure gender-equitable distribution of resources, thereby contributing to equal opportunities for all. Accordingly, reporting on gender impact will be required for various initiatives next year. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, gender considerations will be fully mainstreamed into our annual budgets. Preservation and expanding social safeguards. Mr. Speaker, protecting our less fortunate citizens while helping to lift them out of poverty is our duty and responsibility. Government therefore reaffirms its commitment to leave no one behind, particularly in light of increased cost of living expenses. In this regard, the following social protection initiatives are part of government strategy to help cushion the effects of the pandemic on the most vulnerable. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, a maximum increase of $150 per household for beneficiaries of the SEED program effective January 2022 will be implemented. This additional benefit excludes those added temporarily as part of the stimulus package number 2. EC 1.3 million for the needy assistance program, 1 million for the social books and uniform program, 2 million for the single household support program, $2.8 million for the multi-project for the elderly program, $5 million for the housing assistance program, $10 million for the Grenada home improvement program, including the toilet and bathroom program, and $4 million for the soft loan housing program. In addition to these government initiatives specific to housing, at least 500 of the 647 low-income houses provided through the government of the People's Republic of China will be distributed in 2020. 2 of the 5 housing projects are already completed, and the others are in the final stage of completion. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, $10 million is allocated under government COVID-19 economic stimulus package for the provision of cash transfers benefits in 2022. These will be provided through the temporary horizontal expansion of the SEED program to provide support to over 1,000 households. An unemployment benefit for eligible workers in the formal and informal sectors who have been impacted by the pandemic, and cash transfers to support the expansion of the existing youth entrepreneurship initiatives. Mr. Speaker, in collaboration with FLOW, an internet connectivity program is being provided for indigent families as part of the stimulus package. There is significant interest in this component, which targets 1,500 indigent families, provided broadband internet services to support students with internet access outside of the classroom. Mr. Speaker, update on the Baiko-Clicquot situation. The government remains committed to bringing additional relief to those affected by the Baiko-Clicquot debacle. Recent developments in the Clicquot matter saw the ECCU governments accepting a proposal from the government of Barbados for a bond equivalent to the value of the assets awarded by the judicial manager in the amount of 37 million Barbadian dollars, approximately 50 million EC dollars. The Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU governments are now exploring options to monetize the bond so that policyholders can receive cash upfront rather than waiting for the bond to mature. Overall, Mr. Speaker, these initiatives will significantly impact the less fortunate among us, providing much-needed improvement to the living standards of the vulnerable, and a hand up to struggling businesses, while at the same time fostering youth entrepreneurship. Mr. Speaker, climate resilience and the environment. Through strategic alliances with key global climate finance partners, Grenada has made steady progress in building resilience to shock and protecting the environment from damage and degradation. Given the urgency of the climate change, Grenada will continue to aggressively pursue its commitment through its revised nationally determined contribution, NDC, to reduce its emission by 40% of the pre-2010 level by the year 2030. With the electricity and transport sectors accounting for over 70% of our carbon footprint, efforts will concentrate on reaching 100% of electricity generation through renewable sources and 20% of vehicles being powered by renewable energy sources by the year 2030, the deadline. With respect to the latter, government will lead by example, with 25% of new vehicles purchased next year being renewable energy powered. Mr. Speaker, Grenada will also update its National Adaptation Plan in 2022, providing a roadmap for further critical interventions required to respond to the climate crisis. Our climate change adaptation strategy must not only address policy issues, but must consider as well the development of more resilient physical infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the Public Sector Investment Program is a centerpiece of the economic recovery effort. Accelerating its implementation during the present crisis can boost job creation and help achieve more resilient infrastructure over the short and long term. Government will therefore continue its efforts to scale up infrastructure development in Grenada through the contribution of major infrastructural projects that are already underway and embarking on new ones. Mr. Speaker, before I delve into the list of projects, allow me to address the serious misinformation around the use of the National Transformation Fund. Mr. Speaker, there is a concerted effort to create a perception that there is no accountability and transparency in the use of the NTF resources. This is very far from the truth. All NTF spending is approved every year in this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, and is included in the estimates of revenue and expenditure. In elaborating in some of the major public sector projects, I will highlight those that are funded by the NTF. Further, Mr. Speaker, the NTF regulations are clear on setting aside 40% of all NTF resources for emergencies and debt reduction. It begs the question, therefore, Mr. Speaker, is there really a lack of transparency and accountability in the use of the NTF resources? Or is there an ulterior motive to discredit the acute management of the country's financial resources? The projects, Mr. Speaker. St. John's River Flood Mitigation Project. I wish to thank the residents and businesses in River Road and the surrounding areas for their patience and understanding as it relates to this project. This community has long been affected by flooding, and this project seeks to alleviate that issue. The allocation of $25 million for the completion of this project next year is funded entirely from the NTF resources. Mongkuma Road construction. Mr. Speaker, the reconstruction of the Mongkuma Road will provide an alternative and shorter route for users of the Western Main Road corridor to get to and from the town of St. George. This $11.2 million contract was awarded in October this year, with completion expected in April of 2022. An allocation of $3 million will go towards the continuation of the project next year. Mr. Speaker, this is another construction project that is funded entirely from NTF resources. Grenada Commercial Complex. This important project, Mr. Speaker, has been delayed, but are now being reviewed. Contractors' bids are with the procurement division in the Ministry of Finance. An amount of $4 million has been budgeted for the rollout of this project next year. This again, Mr. Speaker, is a project funded entirely by the NTF. Grenada Resilience Improvement Project, GRIP. This, Mr. Speaker, is a $40 million project, and it succeeds the Regional Disaster Vulnerability Risk Reduction Project, under which several schools and medical facilities were reconstructed. The Grenada Resilience Improvement Project, which seeks to address coastal erosion and flood risk along the Eastern Main Road, as well as the reconstruction of the Balthazar Bridge, will be considered by the World Bank in March 2022. Once approved, this project will be completed within 18 to 24 months. The Western Main Road Corridor Upgrade Project. Mr. Speaker, travel along the western corridor of the island continues to pose a challenge for motorists. After months of delay and non-performance, Grenada terminated the contract of the design and consultancy firm hired for this project. The second-ranked firm is now engaged in design works, and actual construction is expected to commence next year. Mr. Speaker, this project is funded in large measure through a grant from the United Kingdom as part of its Caribbean Infrastructure Facility, UKCIF program, administered by the Caribbean Development Bank. An amount of $16 million is allocated to be spent in 2022. The Molyneux Landslip Rehabilitation Project. Mr. Speaker, after careful deliberations, government has decided to use local resources that must be spent on the overall project to undertake the Molyneux Landslip Rehabilitation component of the Western Main Road Corridor Upgrade Project. Completing this component will not only allow for the return of traffic to the area sooner, it will also have significant tangible benefits, including supporting a stronger recovery. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that the detailed designs have commenced for this project, together with the pre-qualification of suitable contractors. Construction works will commence in the first quarter of next year, and $6 million has been approved for this project in 2022. Grenada Climate Resilience Water Sector Project, GCRUISE. Mr. Speaker, as programmed, implementation under this $125 million project, which is jointly funded by the Green Climate Fund, the German government, and the government of Grenada, commenced in earnest this year. Several critical activities were finalized, including procurement of key experts, completion of all conditions precedent to the disbursement of the grant funding, and receipt of the first drawdown. It is anticipated that full construction works on the project will commence in 2022. Enhanced Direct Access Project. Implementation of this $54 million regional project financed through the grant from the Green Climate Fund accelerated in 2021. The objective of this project is to make accessible grant resources for climate change resilient investments to the public sector, non-governmental organizations, and civil society organizations and communities. The project is administered through the Rural Development Unit and is expected to disburse grants in excess of $3.2 million in 2022. The Morris Bishop International Airport upgrade. Mr. Speaker, preparatory works on the much appreciated and anticipated upgrade of the Morris Bishop International Airport is progressing smoothly. The design works are substantially complete, and procurement activities for the lighting system and other key consultancies have commenced. The scope of this project includes rehabilitation of the runway and bypass road, and upgrade of the passenger terminal to enhance disaster response capabilities. Work on the bypass road is expected to start before the end of the year, and implementation of physical infrastructure works will ramp up in the second quarter of 2022. The Southwest Coast Infrastructure Improvement and Flood Mitigation Project. Mr. Speaker, this consultancy will identify the cause of the flooding in Grenada the town of St. George, including Tantine, as well as in Grenfell, and provide design solutions to mitigate the problem. Mr. Speaker, a consultant has been selected following the tender process, and we are now awaiting from the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development, which is financing the consultancy through a grant of 3 million EC dollars, the no objection to award the contract. St. Patrick Road Rehabilitation and Upgrading Project Phase 1. Mr. Speaker, work on this project is 95% completed. The total cost of Phase 1 has increased by 6 million EC dollars due to increase in the workload for the project, making that project now value at $30 million. Completion is expected in the first quarter of 2022. This project has created employment opportunities for over 500 persons in the neighboring communities and has further strengthened the country's stock of resilient infrastructure. An amount of $2.5 million has been budgeted for the remaining activities under this project. A phase 2 of this project is being pursued with the OPEC Fund for International Development, OFID, to address the remaining road sections already identified in the overall project. The Sutter's Breakwater Project. Mr. Speaker, the Sutter's Breakwater Project seeks to prevent the further deterioration of the shoreline and properties in the Sutter's Bay area. The project design will include a series of breakwaters combined with a revetment in the most damaged areas of the shoreline. An engineering design consultancy firm has already been procured. The construction phase of this project is expected to commence in the fourth quarter of 2022, with the creation of several hundred jobs over its 18 months duration. The National Disaster Rehabilitation and Reconstruction, the Gulf Extreme Rainfall Project, Mr. Speaker, this project is funded by the Caribbean Development Bank at a cost of $5 million. Under this project, construction on the Brothers Bridge commenced in October at a cost of $2.9 million. The project also involves slope stabilization in areas such as Brothers, Closure, Grosse Point, Maran, Market Square, and Millet. To ensure the smooth implementation of this project, the bypass road enclosure, which connects the eastern and western roads of the island, was rehabilitated at a cost of $1 million. A sum of $3.5 million is allocated for the rollout of this project in 2022. Grenada Water Supply Expansion System and Sewage Improvement Project. This $34.8 million project is financed through a grant from the UK SIF program, with the National Water and Sewage Authority as the implementing agency. The goal of the project is to contribute to the strengthening of the water sector in Grenada, reduce water sector risk, improve the sewer system in the town of St. George, and build resilience to the impact of climate change in the sector's infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, construction has been delayed and is now scheduled to commence in the first half of next year. The Road Improvement and Maintenance Program. Mr. Speaker, a sum of $10 million is provided for the improvement and maintenance of the country's roads network next year. It is important to ensure that our roads do not deteriorate beyond repair and that they are safe for motorists and pedestrians alike. An indirect benefit of this program is that it provides livelihood support to daily paid workers to help feed their families. A total of $13.1 million was expended this year. Concrete works. Mr. Speaker, under this program, government continues to undertake small-scale infrastructure works with tremendous positive impact, including the creation of jobs in the rural economies. For 2021, $19.9 million was invested in concrete pavements, retaining walls, drains, and culverts to protect the integrity of our road infrastructure, utilities, and private properties along the country's road network. A sum of $10 million is allocated for the concrete roads program next year, with the potential to create over 1,000 construction jobs. Mr. Speaker, this year, asphalt works were undertaken on various sections of our road network throughout our country at a cost of $15.5 million. A sum of $12 million is allocated for the continuation of this program next year. One of the major problems affecting the asphalt programs, Mr. Speaker, is the availability of hot mix asphalt. Mr. Speaker, to address this problem and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the program, government has entered into a lease arrangement to revive the telescope quarry to support the production of hot mix asphalt and aggregates. This increased production of hot mix asphalt will provide job opportunities for residents in telescope and surrounding areas. Carriacou and Petite Martinique affairs. Mr. Speaker, specific mention must be made of the sister islands of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, where government continues to make significant investments to advance development. The sum budgeted under the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs for 2022 is $19.5 million, an increase of $2.3 million over 2021. Some of the major projects and programs for 2022 include proprietary works on the Carriacou Ministerial Complex, $1 million, road rehabilitation and maintenance program, $3.8 million, Carriacou Airport expansion, $0.5 million, Petite Martinique Enhancement Project, $0.5 million, and the Nursery Improvement Botanical Garden Project, $0.12 million. Mr. Speaker, several other interventions across various areas, including in agriculture and fisheries, infrastructure development, housing, health and wellness, social protection, and community empowerment, youth development, among others, will also be implemented on the sister isles. Mr. Speaker, while on the topic of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I wish to remind that the COVID-19 Economic Support Secretariat, CES office, is housed in the Resource Center in Carriacou to provide support under the stimulus package for eligible citizens. The foregoing, Mr. Speaker, is a mere sample of the many projects and programs which the public sector, within the public sector, that will generate in excess of 4,500 jobs and income opportunities in the construction sector. A detailed breakdown of the PSIP can be found in the estimates of revenue and expenditure. Other cost of living relief measures. Mr. Speaker, multiple references have been made in this budget statement to the debilitating effects of the pandemic on livelihoods, businesses, education, just about every aspect of our lives. For close to 2 years, we have witnessed the physical and financial toll of the pandemic and have heard the agonizing cry of our constituents as they face economic challenges. As parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, we continue to receive an increasing number of requests for help, in some cases from people who have never had to seek help before. Across all strata of the society, there is a palpable need as people are battered, Mr. Speaker, by the destructive winds of the pandemic. Their own desire, their one desire, being survival. At times, Mr. Speaker, the requests are even beyond our reach, but we try as best we can, recognizing that one of the most important responsibilities in this life is to be our brother's keeper. Mr. Speaker, put simply, we care. The government cares deeply for the people of our beloved country. Therefore, we have constantly sought to identify measures to bring much needed relief to the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and the Petite Martinique. Further to the many initiatives identified earlier, including cash transfers for the vulnerable, unemployment benefits, internet connectivity program, loan support measures for entrepreneurs, and grant support for youth entrepreneurship. The government finds it necessary to expand the reach of this much-needed relief effort. Mr. Speaker, the rising cost of fuel and increased transportation costs have contributed to significant increase in the cost of basic commodities. As part of the 2022 fiscal relief measures, the government will also zero-rate the VAT on electricity consumption for domestic consumers with usage up to 500 kilowatt hours per month. Government will also remove the environmental levy for all category of consumers whose usage does not exceed 500 kilowatt hours. In other words, Mr. Speaker, domestic customers consuming up to a maximum of 500 kilowatt hours per month will be relieved of government charges on their electricity bills. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, with the rise in the price of fuel expected to continue, a reduction of 25% on the non-fuel charge per kilowatt hour will be instituted for all categories of consumers. These changes will take effect from the next billing cycle. Mr. Speaker, consider for a moment, would this have been possible with WRB as owners of Grenada? I think not, Mr. Speaker. Government's ability to initiate these relief measures in the electricity rate is only possible because the government of Grenada now has controlling shares in our own electricity company. At long last, Grenada can work in the true interest of the people, Mr. Speaker. While the cost of the repurchase forced on us by arbitration was high, already benefits are being realized. With WRG still in control, were WRB still to be in control, there will be no such relief, Mr. Speaker. And their lawyer, Mr. Speaker, their lawyer, Mr. Speaker, will definitely be in the forefront, in the courts, preventing any arrangement for meaningful relief for the people pursued by this government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the slump in supply and consumption at the height of the pandemic triggered increased costs for fuel, and in recent months, motorists have paid more at the pump. The government will implement a cap of $15 per gallon on gasoline and diesel, effective from the next petroleum price change on December 18th, 2021. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding that VAT is already removed on most basic food items, such as rice, flour, sugar, bread, ground provision, vegetables, fish, etc. Government will exempt VAT on an additional 5 items effective January 2022. Saltfish, turkey parts, vegetable cooking oil, cheddar cheese, and split peas. Mr. Speaker, against the background of reduced revenue, these initiatives impose a tremendous burden on the part of the government. But we are convinced that this is the appropriate course of action and one which will stimulate more activity in the local economy and fuel the recovery process. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the significant fall in revenue since the onset of the pandemic, government has consistently honored its monthly wage bill, which including pensions amounts to roughly $30 million per month, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, I am pleased to report that we have settled in full all outstanding increases to teachers, police officers, public servants, and the pensioners. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the 4% increase due in 2022 will take effect from January, and government will honor its obligation to public officers. Mr. Speaker, workers on contracts have long been clamoring for better conditions. Cabinet has directed the Department of Public Administration to develop a framework for addressing the concerns of these employees. This framework is expected to be approved for implementation in 2022. The minister responsible for DPA will speak about this in further detail. This is a clear testimony, Mr. Speaker, that government is committed to the welfare of all its workers. Mr. Speaker, government has consistently expressed its profound appreciation for our frontline workers who have led the charge in this relentless battle against COVID-19. Almost 2 years later, they are understandably battle-weary, but many of them keep going, energized by the delivery of quality service to their countrymen and women. They routinely make personal sacrifices and forego quality time with their loved ones. Although the pandemic calls for greater caution with respect to expenditure, rewarding our frontline heroes is something that must and will be done. Our pledge today is to show appreciation in a tangible way. Mr. Speaker, I therefore announce that all frontline public sector workers, defined as all officers of the Royal Grenada Police Force, along with medical personnel and ancillary workers in the Ministry of Health, who physically performed and continue to perform, and by virtue of their duties were exposed to the risk of COVID-19, will receive an additional month's pay during the month of December. This is a token of government's immense appreciation for your selfless service in leading this crucial fight against COVID-19. We acknowledge the tremendous sacrifice made in helping to keep our beloved country and the people safe. We thank you and we applaud your efforts. Mr. Speaker, there are many other categories of workers across the public sector who augmented the duties of the frontline personnel previously mentioned. playing an integral role in executing the additional responsibilities required for the protection of lives and livelihood during the pandemic. These workers, Mr. Speaker, will receive similar reward based on established criteria. Government is convinced that our public officers are deserving of such recognition and reward. For without their committed service, a challenging period in our country's history will be made even more difficult. Mr. Speaker, government recognizes the hard work and dedication of many other public workers. As such, all other workers in the public sector who consistently perform duties from the onset of the pandemic to date will receive an additional half-month's pay in December. Mr. Speaker, these initiatives will obviously temporarily increase government's wage bill, but we believe that these tokens of our deepest appreciation are warranted at this time. Mr. Speaker, we are well aware that the pandemic has created a financial challenge across many sectors, but we want to encourage statutory bodies and private sector entities to also consider sharing a small token of appreciation with their employees this Christmas. Acknowledgement. Mr. Speaker, the past 20 months have been extremely difficult, but we have prevailed. I am indeed thankful to all who have given and all that we have gotten so far. A detailed listing of acknowledgements can be found in the printed version of this statement. Permit me, however, Mr. Speaker, to mention a few. Once again, I thank the Almighty God for his mercies. Allow me also to reiterate my thanks to the Honorable Prime Minister. I am happy to have been given the opportunity to lead the Ministry of Finance in the past year and a few months. It has been both a challenging and exciting experience. I would also like to express my deepest appreciation to my other cabinet colleagues for their ongoing sacrifice and the support. Also, Mr. Speaker, I would like to mention the Attorney General and her staff, the Secretary to the Cabinet, permanent secretaries, heads of non-ministerial departments, the Press Secretary, managers and staff of statutory bodies and state-owned enterprises, and all other public officers who have contributed to the preparation and delivery of this budget statement. Permit me also to express my profound appreciation to the Permanent Secretary and the staff of the Ministry of Finance for their tireless effort. I have seen their commitment and dedication firsthand, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the Clerk of Parliament and his staff, who have given me full support in facilitating the delivery of my presentation. Mr. Speaker, it will be remiss of me if I did not thank my family for their love and support, and my constituents of St. George Southeast for the unwavering support and confidence in my representation in this honorable House. Conclusion. Mr. Speaker, this budget demonstrates in no uncertain terms the actions of a government by the people, for the people, and of the people. Mr. Speaker, we are in the fight of our lives, literally and figuratively, as we combat an unseen enemy that threatens our very existence and our means of survival. But we are battle ready. We have weathered many storms before, and we are resilient. The pandemic may be far from over, but we are not done fighting. The indomitable will of the people of Grenada, embedded in the spirit of our ancestors, will prevail. We are determined to protect the development gains achieved through the immense sacrifices of our people. Our economy will survive and our people will thrive. Investor confidence is high and many opportunities abound on this path towards sustainable, all-inclusive development. The period of darkness that enveloped us, forcing businesses to shut their doors, has given way to the dawn of a new day, illuminated with hope, optimism, and confidence. The future we wished for is now. Let us embrace it in furtherance of our developmental objectives. Jobs are returning, unemployment is falling, government revenues are strengthening. These are all remarkable achievements considering the economy and the enormity of the challenges posed by COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, we did not come this far to fail. Going forward, government will continue its astute management of the economy. And as a people, we must engage in responsible behavior that will not further compromise hard-won development gains or impede the recovery process. Vaccination is a choice, but it is the right choice. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the right choice. We have to reverse vaccine hesitancy so that more of our people can have a fighting chance to survive this health crisis. We all have a duty to protect ourselves, protect our loved ones, protect our country. The policies and programs I have laid out today, Mr. Speaker, will help us cushion the economic fallout of the pandemic, empower our youthful population to engage in entrepreneurship, protect us and our loved ones, create sustainable jobs and incomes, help our businesses, big and small, keep the doors open, and position our country, Mr. Speaker, to build on the progress made towards achieving robust, inclusive, and sustainable growth and development. But, Mr. Speaker, for this plan to succeed, we need to summon the collective energies and the capabilities of the Grenadian people as we march resolutely forward to the common goal of national development. To borrow from the lyrics of a patriotic song, hand in hand for a better land. A people who can understand. That's business. Brighter out of darkness. May God continue to bless all of us.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of Government Business and Minister of Finance.
You will have to reiterate the motion.
Yeah. Honorable members, we have heard the estimate of revenue and expenditure for 2022. And this is the motion that is before us. The motion by the Minister of Finance that whereas it is necessary to provide for the services of the State of Grenada for the year 2022 by means of an Appropriation Act, that the estimate of revenue and expenditure for the fiscal year January 1st to December 31st, 2022 be approved. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As is customary, Mr. Speaker, after the budget presentation, I wish to propose that this House doth now adjourn to Monday, the 29th November at 9 o'clock in the forenoon.
Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House now stands adjourned until 9 o'clock in the forenoon of the 29th of November 2021. Before I finally put the question, let me just urge us that as we continue with the debate on the budget, which would be taking place from Monday, the 29th, let me remind all parliamentary representatives to refer to Standing Order 40, which deals with debate on the budget. And to remind you that as parliamentary representative for your constituency would be listening to hear what part of that budget satisfies them. Before I close, let me pass a message from a gentleman who is a farmer. He said to me, Mr. Pierre, I know you're going down to the budget. Tell them for me I want to prepare my own budget. But in order to prepare my budget, I have to know, because I deal with nutmeg and I deal with cocoa. I don't have the strength again to worry too much about bananas. But my nutmeg, I'm selling dry nutmeg. I'm getting paid for it as green nutmeg, and all the may spoil because I'm being able to sell my nutmeg now every 2 weeks. You say, but I have to spend my time in my land seeing after my nutmegs. And it's a waste of time to me because I cannot make ends meet. I'm an independent man. I don't like to ask for handout or hand up. I want to work for me money. You said my cocoa. I only hear sometimes that they're buying cocoa. So my cocoa stay on the tree, and by the time I get the chance to crack it, I'm getting young cocoa seedlings coming out. So please ask them for me to tell me how to prepare my budget. So I leave that in the hands of the debaters who would talk to the farmer for his nutmegs and his cocoa because he is suffering. Honorable members, the question is that this Honorable House stands adjourned until Monday the 29th at 9 in the forenoon. All those who have that opinion say aye. Of the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Please be reminded that lunch is provided. Because we had budget, so we say you'll get some money. Lunch is provided. And for the general public, the tent outside will provide you with some form of victuals.